So before we get to have Lloyd come up, I just want to share a few thoughts with you. Did you know that there's more than 400,000 people in the state of Colorado that are living with a disability? That makes up about 7% of the overall population of our state. Nationwide, there is a known dramatic decrease in finding work when diagnosed with a disability. 35% of people with a disability throughout the U.S. are employed. That's compared to 76% of people who are living without a disability. We must do better as a society. The Dalai Lama once said, "It is under the greatest adversity that there exists the greatest, let me try this again. It is under the greatest adversity that there exists the greatest potential for doing good, both for oneself and for others." Think about that. We've all had moments of adversity. Anybody in the room has had that at all? Maybe? Okay. And we think of those things, we try to get through it quickly, or we try to put it under the carpet. But it's those very moments that allow us that opportunity to do the greatest good, if we truly look at the lesson that could be learned. Seeing others' trials gives us the greatest potential to do good for those around us. It's one thing to acknowledge a problem, but it's truly life-changing when we offer ourselves as part of the solution. Lloyd Lewis is serving as the president and CEO of Thrift stores and is doing just that. Thrift stores operates 25 thrift stores and 16 donation stations throughout Colorado, and is one of the largest employers of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the state of Colorado. Now, before I get a little bit further, some people say, wait a minute, the word disability, that sounds bad. It's not PC. And I got to interview Lloyd a while ago on the TV show Mountains of Opportunity, and I asked him that very question, because I always use the term people with mental challenges or other terms that we've heard in society. But in fact, the idea of using this word disability is in fact the word to use, but to make sure you use the word person first. These are people first. And yes, they may have an intellectual, whatever it might be, but always look at them as people first. So when I'm using that term, I'm not being disrespectful, and Lloyd, you can feel free to elaborate on that if you would like. Lloyd plays an instrumental role in making sure the necessary funding goes to supporting those with developmental disabilities in the state of Colorado for the ARC chapters. Under Lloyd's leadership and partnership with Volunteers of America, ARC's annual food drive to supply Meals on Wheels and soup kitchens and food pantries has grown to be the second largest in the state. And this year, over 160 tons of food were collected and distributed. That's pretty powerful. I don't even know what 160 tons of food looks like, but my guess is it looks like a lot of food at the end of the day. Lloyd has also helped to grow the company's revenue from $30 million to $80 million annually, and earned income from $2 million to $12 million annually. He's the kind of guy that you want running an organization, and you'll hear more about that. In addition, Lloyd has been involved on the board in a variety of other community organizations, including Rocky Mountain Down Syndrome Association, Health Teamworks, and the Stout Street Foundation. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Lloyd Lewis.
Thank you very much, Brian. I am really honored to be here tonight. I'm delighted to be with you tonight, and I really appreciate all of the great work that Brian does, and that was a wonderful introduction. The last time I remember an introduction that positive, it happened to be my mom in her retirement community introducing me to her neighbors. So thank you, Brian. You always do a wonderful job. I want to acknowledge one of our board members here tonight, Scott Chandler. Raise your hands. Round of applause. Before I start to talk about the ARC thing, I just want to describe a little bit about my background pre-ARC. In the 80s, I was in municipal investment banking in Philadelphia before a lot of you were born. I then went to the University of Chicago, got an MBA in finance, came here as an analyst for IBM, have worked with a series of companies post-IBM, including director of finance for a publicly traded medical equipment company. And most recently, prior to ARC, I was CFO for a high-tech company in Longmont that was ultimately sold to Micron. So you might say to yourself, well, why ARC? Why is this guy at ARC? My ARC story really begins in 2003 with the birth of my son Kennedy, who unbeknownst to his mother and I would be born with Down syndrome. The doctor came into our room about an hour later and unceremoniously announced that he had no good news for us. And I thought, oh my God, maybe my son died. And I asked him what he was talking about. He said, well, we suspect he has Down syndrome. And when I asked him what Down syndrome was, he said it was like mongoloidism. Somehow I knew that was incorrect, so I walked him out of the room, banned him from re-entering the room, got some nurses. They had good information about Down syndrome. It's the presence of an extra chromosome, chromosome 21. Kids with Down syndrome and other disabilities live at home today with their families. They go to public schools. They get very involved in the communities. So that was my initial introduction to the world of disabilities. Following that, I attended a Coleman Institute dinner at CU, sat next to a neuroscientist, Dr. Linda Cernick. We talked about advocating for Down syndrome research, and we partnered up. We met with the director of the NIH. We spoke at the National Down Syndrome Congress Convention, and we were fortunate to meet Michelle C. Whitten, who now runs the Global Down Syndrome Foundation, who has a little girl my son's age, and she created the Linda Cernick Institute at CU, named for the neuroscientist that I met, doing wonderful work and research. From there, I was invited to join the ARC of Colorado board. The ARC of Colorado does systemic and individual advocacy for people with intellectual disabilities. From there, I was recruited to the thrift stores, where I thought, well, maybe I could take my business skills and try to help grow funding to increase programs that would help people like my son. So that's how I got to ARC thrift stores. So ARC thrift stores. What is ARC thrift stores? So we're really a social enterprise. Our whole reason for being is to run a business to create and grow funding to support charitable programs. In our case, our vehicle for doing that are thrift stores, and the charitable programs we support people with intellectual disabilities. And I want to describe the business side first, and then I'm going to get into the more description of the charities we support. But it turns out we are now a very large company. We have over 1,700 employees. We've added a couple of stores, Brian. We now have 27 stores from Fort Collins to Pueblo. We have over 1 million square feet of leased space for stores and operations and warehousing. We have nearly 150,000 square feet of warehousing. I have the typical executive team helping me manage this very large business. I have a chief financial officer. I have a director of administration, director of sales, director of marketing, directors of warehousing, telemarketing, and trucking. We manage our thrift stores like any other retail organization. We are very focused on same-store sales metrics. We target 3 to 4% increases in sales every year. We look at same-store sale customer growth. We look at dollars per customer, price per item. We emphasize merchandising, cleanliness, lighting. We look for store locations like all other retailers. Visibility, high traffic, good demographics, and we emphasize seasonal and sales promotions to increase our business. So in many respects on the business side, we're like traditional retail. As a result, during my tenure, we've had over 40 million customer transactions through our stores. With an average transaction of $15, that means we've done over $500 million of revenue during my tenure since 2006. Over the next decade, we estimate we'll do over $1 billion in revenue. So we are, in many ways, a business supporting funding for people with intellectual disabilities. You might ask how we get our donations. A lot of our donations are dropped off at the back doors of our stores. Some donations are dropped off at individual donation stations. We partner with other charities to help us support getting donations for our stores, but we're probably best known for something called Jane from ARC. And raise your hand if you've ever gotten a call from Jane from ARC. And those of you who haven't, we're going to go around the table and get your cell phones. Jane, by the way, was a real person, a real volunteer 50 years ago when we started our company, who in her home would call people to get donations. That has evolved into the largest nonprofit call center in the state. We have 50 Janes and Jameses. We have fleet of 50 trucks that on a weekly basis do 8,000 curbside pickups. And everywhere I go, most people know Jane from ARC, and they tend to think it's the same Jane calling them every time, which I get a kick out of. The end result of all of that is we have collected during my tenure over 850 million pounds of donations. That has saved the state and municipalities about $30 million in landfill costs that they would have had that stuff not been donated to us. Most of our donations are sold in our stores. Donations that aren't sold in our stores are recycled across the world to challenged populations who use them to create little businesses to support their families, or they have a means to get household goods and clothing that they might not otherwise be able to afford. We recycle across all parts of the world, a lot of third world countries. The stuff that we collect, if not sold in the stores, may end up in Africa or Latin America or South America or India or Mexico. If you see a picture of a kid wearing a LeBron jersey in Africa, that might be one of your donations. We've been very fortunate to receive 40 Best Thrift Store awards during my tenure, from magazines and newspapers in Fort Collins and Greeley and Loveland and Broomfield and Boulder and Aurora and the Springs and Denver. And we're very honored to have received all of that. And at the end result of all this business approach that we do, as Brian said, is we've been fortunate to greatly increase the revenue of the company, which allows us to greatly increase the support of the chapters that we provide. So this is a graph that shows revenue growth from when I started, a little over 30 mil, to this year nearly 90 mil. We think we're a couple of years away from being a $100 million company. But the way I run the company is, the better the business we run, the more earnings we get, the more we can fund programs. So that's the approach I've taken as the CEO of ARC. Lastly, on the business aspect, we're now having a $90 million annual impact and growing on the state of Colorado, with over $40 million in payroll and benefits. So we're very proud of what we're able to contribute economically to the state. Now I want to switch from the business to fund the charities, and I want to talk about the charities that we fund. So our primary charter is to fund 14 ARC advocacy chapters from Fort Collins to Pueblo and on the western slope. They maintain staffs of advocates who work with people with intellectual disabilities who may have Down syndrome or autism or cerebral palsy or all forms of cognitive deficit. And they help them find jobs and housing and medical services and services in schools. As Brian mentioned, in the world of intellectual disabilities, 80% of people with intellectual disabilities are unemployed. There's a big shortage of housing for people with intellectual disabilities. There's a need for enhanced advocacy for medical services and services in schools. The chapters we support are working with nearly 10,000 clients annually, helping them live better lives and improve their living situations. All of our chapters are affiliated with the ARC of the United States, and the ARC of the United States was literally the first organization founded by parents in the 1940s, at that time, to advocate for humane treatment of people with intellectual disabilities. People like my son in the 1940s were taken from their families, sent to these large institutions, often mistreated and abused with shortened lifespans. And these parents said, you know, we want to do something to help improve treatment of people with disabilities that we love, our kids that we're not able to see. So that's how the ARC of the United States got founded. The ARC of the United States through the years has been instrumental in many critical areas. So they were on the forefront of legislation to allow people with intellectual disabilities to go to public schools. And they were vital in the effort for the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. So we're very proud to be affiliated with the ARC of the United States. In addition to supporting the ARC chapters, internally, we have hired over 300 employees with intellectual disabilities. This is Ryan, who's a real character, but we have hired 300. By the way, if you go into a store and he says, if he asks you how you're doing, you have to say great. If you don't say great, he will hug you until you say the word great. And he will constantly repeat that question. The other fun thing is I got a call from Ryan early one morning. He said, Lloyd, I got this great idea. I said, Ryan, what's your idea? He said, well, I want to create a wrestling display. I don't particularly like wrestling, but I said, well, okay, give it a shot. So he created a World Wrestling Federation wrestling display, sold out first day. Sold out first day. Anyway, we have funded about $20 million to employment of people with disabilities in the organization. We have dramatically grown employment. When I started, we had 10 employees with disabilities. Today, we have over 300, and it continues to grow. We've become one of the largest integrated employers of people with intellectual disabilities in the state of Colorado. When I put in the program, I put it in because I thought it was the right thing to do because I'm the father of a child with Down syndrome. It turned out to be one of the smarter business decisions I made. What I discovered is when you work side by side with someone with an intellectual disability, you get that you're working for more than just a paycheck. You're working to provide a better life for people with intellectual disabilities. And frankly, it's a little hard to get negative and complain if you work side by side with someone with Down syndrome. They will look at you very confused on why don't you think this is the greatest job in the history of the world. But what I've found is it has enhanced morale in the company, which in turn has increased productivity and increased revenue and earnings. I would do it anywhere. And the CEO of Microsoft is starting to do it at Microsoft. He has a severely disabled son with cerebral palsy, and he's finding the same thing at Microsoft. Beyond the disabilities work we do, we support a lot of other key programs in the state. So we have something called Vehicles for Charity that collects vehicles donated to hundreds and hundreds of charities in Colorado and across the United States, and net proceeds go to support these charities. So we provided $30 million in funding to these charities during my tenure. We're a very big supporter of Colorado Public Radio, many humane societies, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Catholic charities. We have collected 75,000 cars with our staff of 4 people at the warehouse off of I-25 and 58. So I don't know how they do it, but they get the job done. We have a voucher program. We provide vouchers so that people can obtain household goods and clothing in our stores, people in need, victims of fires and floods, women from safe houses, people from homeless programs, people in substance abuse programs, people who might not otherwise be able to provide for their families. As Brian mentioned, we have the second largest food drive in the state, 3 million pounds during my tenure, in partnership with Volunteers of America, going to Meals on Wheels and soup kitchens and food pantries in excess of 160 tons per year. And someone works for me, Brian, knows how much that is. It's like 20 semi-trailers or something, but that's the equivalent of 160 tons. So at the end of the day, why do we do all of this? I'm going to give you a few examples of the people that we are supporting and helping in the company. So in this slide, you see on the very right, Garnon Smooth, mid-50s, Down syndrome, works in our East Colfax store. He is very popular in our store, and he's looking very snazzy there. That's one of our fashion shows, and he was all dressed up for that. He is very popular in our store. He's very positive. He loves the ladies in the store. And one of the stories I tell about Garnon is that every week he brings in his bowling score and announces his bowling score over the PA system, and all the customers and employees applaud. His nickname is Mr. 100. In the center picture is Robbie. Robbie worked for nearly a decade at our Broomfield store. He was a utility/janitor employee. Again, very positive, very generous, very caring. He loves teddy bears. Those are just 4 or 5 of the 100+ teddy bears that he had in his room. And he told us he would have long conversations with them on a nightly basis just before going to sleep, just to really connect with people that he considered were his special friends. And he had names for all of his teddy bears. Unfortunately, we lost Robbie about a year ago due to a brain tumor, and he's no longer with us. But he had a big, big impact on our company. You're going to meet Heather on the left in just a minute. She's excited to meet you. Lastly, before I bring up someone who's going to talk to you about her job and her life and her dreams and her goals as someone with a disability, is my son Kennedy. So this is Kennedy and me at the Rapids. Kennedy is the light of my life. He is my inspiration. He's my reason for being. There's lots of stories about Kennedy. So one story is he loves music, he loves to dance, he's a really good dancer. I happen to suck at dancing, but he's really good. And his first thing was dancing to Cat Stevens on a PBS special we were watching. Now he dances anytime he hears music. And literally, there was a time when he would dance if we turned on the blender or opened the garage door, which I thought was very cool. He hears music in everything. Another story I like to tell about Kennedy is he attended his stepbrother's end-of-season basketball banquet at Kent, Denver, and the team had had a good year. And at the end of the dinner, the coach said, of the family and friends there, who would like to stand up and say something about the team and the season? So Kennedy stood up at the exact same time as the CEO of Western Union. So Heckmet decided to sit back down and defer to Kennedy. And Kennedy proceeded to give this very intricate presentation on how you properly bounce a basketball and about his work and love of the concession stand. And he concluded his remarks for some reason about stressing the importance of shampoo and soap. So we're not entirely sure what that meant. Then the coach turned to Heckmet and said, well, Heckmet, your turn. And Heckmet said, no, I can't follow that. That was the CEO of Western Union. So with no further ado, what we'd like to do next, because I can stand up here and bore you some more, but people enjoy hearing from our employees with disabilities to hear about their lives and who they are and what they do. And we're going to invite Heather Pyle to come up, and we're going to have a little conversation. Heather, come on up. Give her a round of applause. So Heather, I'll come up.
Yeah.
Heather, tell everyone where you work, and look at these guys.
I work at the Westminster store.
And tell everyone when you started.
I started October 2013.
And do you like your job in the store?
Oh, yes.
And not all of my employees respond like that, by the way. Now tell people what your job is.
My job is I'm a greeter.
So you greet the customers when they come into the store.
Uh-huh.
So what do you say if...
I say, hi, welcome to ARC. Today is senior day.
Today is senior day? Did you say that because you were looking at me? Behave, Heather, behave. Now tell people who your friends are in the store.
Oh, I've got lots of friends. Jennifer Boyer, Marlene Glim, of course George.
Of course, who?
George.
Of course, George, your manager. So are these people nice to you?
Well, yeah.
You hesitated a bit. I
Yeah.
know you and Marlene get into it a little bit,
Yeah.
but basically they're nice to you.
Yeah.
Why else do you like your job?
I like to karaoke. I like to go to Arc University. I especially go to their karaoke events.
So how many degrees do you have from Arc University?
Oh my gosh. I don't know.
I think you have a PhD, right?
Yeah,
How many degrees does she have, Dominic?
Yeah.
Has how many?
I
40
don't know. Okay.
Many degrees.
Oh, okay.
But that you have so many degrees and a PhD kind of pisses me off. I only have two. I only have two. Now, what are your hobbies? Tell everyone your hobbies.
My hobbies are acting. I am right in the middle of Magic Moments right now.
That's a theater group
Yeah.
for people with disabilities and other
Yeah.
people.
And last year I had my first solo in 10 years.
So a round of applause for that.
Yeah. I was Donna Joe from Haystack, Kansas, and I sang a song from Rising Star. The sun is gonna shine again.
Now, this says you're taking voice lessons. How's that going?
Of course, yes, I am. Uh-huh.
What are your other hobbies?
Let's see. My other hobbies are, let's see. I got a lot of them.
Do you like movies?
Oh yes.
What movies do you like?
Oh, I love movies. I don't like scary kinds, but I like what's that movie? I like The Post.
The Post?
The Post.
The one that just came out?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, do you have a disability?
Yes, I do.
And what is your disability?
I had a stroke when I was just 3 years old, so my right side is paralyzed from my right arm down. I also have Turner syndrome.
Now, tell everyone what Turner syndrome is.
Turner syndrome is the X chromosome in my chest, and what that did was it drained, but it left me with a stroke.
Now, why is it important for people with disabilities to work, do you think?
It's very important for people with disabilities to work because I think pretty much all people with disabilities love to work
And how should people with disabilities be treated?
with the same way that others would like to be treated.
And we've now one of the things that
And I forgot to say, I'm also part of my disability. I am also now fully deaf without my hearing aids. The stroke took all my hearing when I was 3. So, yeah.
now, one of the things we've noticed about you as we got to know is you're afraid of masks and
Yes.
people in costume. Why is that?
Very. It's just when I was little, my mom took me to Disneyland, and the first character that she wanted me to go up to was Mickey, and I said, and I freaked out really bad. I said, it's okay.
Now, when we do our Christmas party and it's me as Santa Claus,
I know.
doesn't that make a difference?
I know.
But you know me,
Well,
and
yeah,
you know
yeah.
it's me being Santa Claus.
Well, yeah.
But that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, where did you go for your last birthday?
I just a few months ago, I just turned 28 years old, and I went to Cabo.
So what did you do in Cabo?
We hung out by the pool, and you know.
Did you have a few drinks?
Lloyd, stop it!
That's an okay question. You're 28. Did you have a beer? Did you have a margarita?
Cool it!
Did you meet any guys?
Oh, cool it! Oh, jeez.
So what did you do by the pool?
I went to the swim-up bar. I just swam around the whole pool.
Now tell everyone when your birthday is.
My birthday is the same as Lloyd Lewis's, January 27th.
So that's a very special day. That's a very special day.
Yes.
So what else do you want to tell these nice folks?
Oh boy.
What do you do with the money you make? Do you put it in savings?
No.
You spend it all? What? You spend all your money? What are you going to do when you retire? So what do you spend your money on?
I don't know.
So you're kind of a spendthrift.
Yes.
Okay, well, as you can tell, Heather's pretty shy. We're trying to break her out.
No.
So let's give Heather a big round of applause.
Wait. What about? Oh yeah. So I recently had to do something that it hurt me really bad. I lost my cat Alexi. We had to put her to sleep
How
a
old was
couple of Saturdays ago.
How old was Alexi?
14.
Oh, that's a shame.
And
We're
she
sorry
had
to hear that.
all the diseases that all cats get.
Oh, very sorry to hear that. Are you going to get another cat, do you think?
Yeah.
Would that be nice to get
But in a
replacement
couple
cat?
of months. Yeah.
In a couple of months.
Yeah.
Well, you did a great job, Heather.
Thank
you for doing
you.
it. Give her a big round of applause. So the heck of it, I'm publishing a book about my experiences with ARC and employing people with disabilities in May, which I'm trying to get my whole family to buy, but so far they're on the fence. And then if you're interested in how you can make a difference with ARC, here's a lot of suggestions. You can donate to ARC, you can schedule pickups, you can shop our stores, you can volunteer, and there's just a lot of what, if you're interested in hiring people like Heather, just reach out to me and we can give you some candidates that you consider. But let's give Heather, where did Heather go? Another big round of applause. So that concludes my presentation, Brian.
Okay, I'm going to ask Lloyd 3 questions, and we'll open it up to the group. So number 1, what has been the greatest challenge in your role as president and CEO of ARC?
Initially, it was turning around the company. When I became CEO in late '05, things weren't as they should be. So it took about a year and getting the right people in place and getting the company turned around. Initially, cash was an issue. That's no longer an issue, thankfully. And let's see. Currently, we are in need of new store locations. We added 3 last year. We're adding 2 this year. We're looking to add 2 to 3 every year. So that's a current challenge that we are working through.
Great, you can keep it. If you could make one change to have the greatest positive impact for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, what would that be?
That is a great question. And I think the answer to that question is if in every school in America they would include people with intellectual disabilities in the main classrooms and support them in the main classrooms, if employers en masse would start to hire people like Heather, if we could figure out a good solution for kids who lose their parents in terms of housing and care, that would be a dream come true.
Great. What would you like your personal legacy to be?
I think the ARC Ambassadors is something that I'm extremely proud of, and something that I never would have envisioned when I started would accomplish what we've accomplished. And if I'm remembered only for that, I've told my wife if something happens to me, my service would be an ambassador party at the Link Rec Center, and I would like them just to have fun and whoop it up, and that would be a great legacy and memory.
That's great. What questions do we have for Lloyd? Yes?
Can you tell me more about the ARC University?
The question is, let me repeat it so we can get it on the video. So the question is, can you tell me more about the ARC University?
We started ARC University 5 or 6 years ago. I got a call from the Daniels Fund saying they wanted to do a big project. And so I gave them 3 ideas, and this is one that I've always wanted to do. And the idea is for most people with intellectual disabilities, post-secondary opportunities are practically nil. There's practically nothing. And a lot of them have unfortunately had not such great experiences in school, being made fun of, et cetera, and excluded. So the idea was to create a post-secondary styled experience for our employees with disabilities. It's a series of 12 post-secondary styled classes in money and computers and pet care. Most are held at the Link Rec Center. We have volunteer teachers. A lot of our staff teaches various topics. And if they participate at all, they get a certificate. If they participate in 6 of 12, they get a bachelor's degree. 9 of 12 a master's, 12 of 12 a PhD. Last year we had 30 masters, 30 PhDs, 10 PhD emeritus, 5 distinguished PhD emeritus. And as they walk across the stage in front of hundreds of family and friends, you would think it's Harvard commencement. And they get all fired up, and some of them aren't even verbal, and they have IQs ranging from 20 to 60. So we're really proud of that. We wanted to create something that was very positive, that would permit some additional learning. That's ARC University.
All right, great question. Who else? Yes, Kyle. So there's a fan right here. So if I'm reading lips, I think I read your lips correctly. We'll see. His question is, what does ARC stand for?
So 75 to 80 years ago, the term mental retardation was adopted as an improvement to prior language being used, like mongoloids, as an example. And it was felt that was an improvement and a better way to refer to people. Today, unfortunately, the R word has become a real negative insult for people with intellectual disabilities. I talk with some of our employees, and they will tear up and get very emotional because they've been called the R word in school and R word by strangers, and it's just a very negative experience. Special Olympics has started something called Spread the Word to End the Words to eliminate the R word. And in the ARC world, when we were first founded in the 1940s, it was Association for Our Citizens. We don't use the R word anymore, it's just ARC. So ARC no longer stands for anything but ARC. The R word has been eliminated in the ARC world out of deference to people with disabilities.
Right? Yes.
What kind of gifts does your son personally have, and maybe where would you like to see him end up, even working-wise in a career when he gets older?
So the question is, what, sorry, we'll get through this eventually. So the question is, what gifts does your son personally have, and what do you see him maybe doing in the future?
He has a great appreciation and love of music. He has a great appreciation and love of dance. He is quite the dancer. His father sucks at dancing, but he's quite a dancer. He loves to sing. His singing is not that great, but he loves to sing. He loves his friends. He just has this very generous, kind-hearted personality. He's sort of a hugging machine. So I took him to a party once. There were 100 people there. He hugged the first person he met, then he had the next one, and he did a loop around everybody. I took him to a smaller event, 7 people. He did 3 loops, and then I sat him down. He just has a very generous personality. He's a real people person. I've told people in our East Colfax store that when Garnons retires, maybe Kennedy takes his place, because Kennedy reminds me a lot of Garnons, the gentleman I described with the bowling score. I just want him to reach whatever his potential is. You know, he reads, he does a little math, he's in some mainstream classes, he is making progress learning, he's still developing his speech. But, you know, like for all kids, you just want him to reach his potential, whatever it is. His oldest sister is working on a PhD in biochem at the University of Washington. That's not Kennedy's capacity, but there'll be a lot of ways he can contribute. And I just hope he finds that place.
Question. Who else? Yes. So Chuck's question, yeah, I'll try to break it down. So Chuck's question is the difference between public education and private education and being the best environment for people with disabilities. Partly, I think, is what you got, but expand upon it as you see fit.
I think goals for public education are to continue to foster inclusion in mainstreaming and mainstream classrooms for people like my son, with proper supports and para support. You know, that's done relatively well in elementary school, a little better. In middle, high schools, I think, can still make some improvement there. Private schools, I'm not familiar with a lot of private schools that actually have programs for people with intellectual disabilities. like the school my stepson went to, Kent Denver. I'd love to see charter schools and private schools create programs for kids with intellectual disabilities. You know, when I meet kids from private schools, they volunteer for Adams Camp and Special Olympics, and they really enjoy helping people with intellectual disabilities. So the next step would be to create programs in private schools where they really could be integrated with people with intellectual disabilities.
That's great. Anyone else? Well, let's give Lloyd and Heather a big round of applause. Okay, so for those that have been here before, I like to share golden nuggets as I've seen them. As I'm the host, I get to make them up, and if you disagree with them, that's okay. We're still going to have the golden nuggets. But I just want to share a story before I get started. So when I graduated from CU Boulder, before I was getting ready to hopefully leave for the Peace Corps, I was in upstate New York in my father's residential real estate firm. And my first client was this couple from the city. And on the weekends, they would drive out in the car, and there's always this individual in the back of the car. And I never got to meet the individual for a long time. And so finally I asked them, who was the person in the back of the car? And they kept looking for a house that would be quiet, hopefully something that was kind of pastoral in the countryside. They had worked their whole life in the city, trying to save up enough money. And the person in the back of their car was their son, who had Down syndrome. And they were trying to save up enough money so that they could bring their son to the countryside and enjoy life with him. And it really touched me, and that was my first sale of a home and being involved in real estate, and I'll always remember it, just helping them to fulfill their dream of taking care of their son. And until you've been in that position where you have someone and you love them so much and you want to create a great environment for them, I just think you don't really have a true understanding. And so I just want to acknowledge Lloyd. You know, things happen to all of us at the end of the day. And what some people may look at as a challenge, Lloyd said, you know what? He took that doctor out of the room, wasn't going to let him back in that room. And since then, he's had a great blessing and impact on many others. And so I just want to encourage all of you, whatever you're going through, because we're all going through something right now, how can you turn that into a positive thing to bless and impact others? And so I just want to acknowledge him for that. So, golden nuggets. Number one, the better the business we run, the more earnings we get, the more we can fund the chapters. Think about your own businesses and what you're involved in, and insert whatever that word is for you. It might be chapters, it might be the homeless, it might be people with cancer, whatever it is. Think of your business and your profession as an opportunity to create value and impact for others. I really truly believe we can all give of our time, our talent, of our treasure. And so figure out how you can get on the field and make a positive impact. Number two, what we can learn from Ryan. If someone doesn't say they are doing great, hug them until they do, right? I love that one. And so in your own life, if you meet someone and they're having a tough day, hug them. Now, there may be some laws against that, so maybe not physically hug them, but hug them emotionally, whatever it might be. We need more people wrapping their arms around each other. Number three, when you work alongside someone with an intellectual disability, you realize that you are helping to benefit others and that having a job is a good thing. How many of you in this room today feel that you have the best job right now and you're happy to show up to that job every day? Yeah, okay, there's a few. The overachievers in the room, whatever, okay? But seriously, I mean, there's a blessing in work. And to take perspective in that you could have the alternative where you don't have a job or an opportunity to have a job. And 80% of your fellow citizens don't have a job. Pretty interesting. Number four, Kennedy is the light of my life. He is my inspiration. He is my reason for living. So for those of us that have kids in the room, and if you have multiple kids, you can't pick one. You can't just say that individual because it makes you look bad for the other kids that you have. But what is your reason for living? What is your inspiration? Is that a person? Is it a thing? Is it your faith? Whatever it is, but make sure you understand what it is, because I really do believe that gives you a lot of drive in life. And Heather, thank you so much for coming. I just love your attitude and your positive demeanor. You're just awesome. And hopefully I'll see you out there at that store. But Heather should be an encouragement to all of us in this room. Having a stroke at 3 years of age. Let that sink in for a moment. having Turner syndrome. But Heather has 40 degrees. Are you kidding me? I mean, let's give her a round of applause. She is an actress. She is a singer. She loves to spend money, which is great. Don't we all do that, right? But she's happily employed and excited to greet people with a smile. And I just love that about you. So you deserve another round of applause. Okay. And I love what Heather said. So these quotes now are going to you. We're going to go away from Lloyd, because you get credit too. All people with disabilities love to work. And I love this one, and really let this one sink in. And should be treated as all other people like to be treated. How many segments in society are people, separating others and demeaning them or whatever? You know what? It's the human condition. We all have hopes. We all have dreams. We all should be treated with love and respect. And I encourage you to look at those different communities all across and figure out how you can have an impact with them. And then what Lloyd said at the end with regards to his son, I want him to reach whatever his potential may be. That's the key, his potential may be. There are a lot of ways we each can contribute. Sometimes as parents or as employers, as friends, we have these higher standards, right? And we expect people to meet our standards. We got to meet them where they are and realize that every single person can be a blessing and can have a positive impact. So again, thank you for both of you and being with us tonight. So, upcoming, let me tell you who's going to be speaking, and we'd love to see you back. On April 12th, we have my friend Sarah Heron. She's founder of SheLift. She is a person that was born with physical differences. She only has one arm, and she is a rock star. You got to come meet her. She's taken that and said, you know what? I'm going to go find young women and take them rock climbing and all kinds of stuff in the outdoors, and she empowers these young women who have physical differences. On May 10th, we have Heather Potters, who's co-founder and vice chairman of PharmaJet. PharmaJet is this really cool science fiction kind of thing where instead of getting a needle in your arm, it shoots something into your arm. I'm a real estate guy. I can tell you what I know about science. But anyway, come listen to her. She'll tell you what she does. Pretty cool. June 14th, we have Michelle C. Whitten, president, CEO, and co-founder of Global Down Syndrome. Global Down Syndrome, they have become the thought leader for this in the world, and it's based right here in Denver. And they're making connections between things like Down syndrome and things like Alzheimer's, and the stuff that they're doing here is going to be transformational. So I highly recommend you come and listen to her. July 12th, we have Herb Atchison. He's mayor of Westminster. He served in public office for 36 years. This guy is a true public servant, and come learn from him. September 13th, we have Mike Pritchard, who's the CFO of the University of Colorado Foundation, and we've got a bunch of other people between now and the end of the year. So, thank you all for being here. Tell your friends, and hopefully we'll see you next time.